All right, our next game, a division matchup. The Seahawks win 30-18 on the road against Arizona. Massive implications for the division in this game. Matthew, the story was Kenneth Walker down. One of those weird practice weeks where things start to look really grim on Thursday. Zach Charbonnet has kind of become this old version of Alexander Madison, where when he's up, he's a big-time play. I mean, he had like 29 fantasy points at halftime.
He was unbelievable. He looked great. There were a lot of like big backup running back performances in this one. We just mentioned Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, both kind of good spot starts. We'll get to Garendo here in a second. But to your point, Zach Charbonnet had the third best fantasy game by a running back this entire year. The Saquon Barkley 46-point game, the Alvin Kamara 44-point game, the only two games better than Zach Charbonnet. It's crazy because Allen had such a big game, because Nakua did, Jefferson. Feels like people aren't really talking about Zach Charbonnet's game the way they should, but just a massive, massive game for Zach Charbonnet. He's had to your point about when he gets an opportunity, he produces. 3 starts this year. In those 3 starts, he's averaging 23 touches a game. He's averaging 123 yards per game, and 27.3 fantasy points per game. I mean, he's an every down back stuck on a team that has another every down back. And I guess for fantasy purposes, we're happy because you sort of, when it's Ken Walker, that's the guy. When Walker's out, it's Charbonnet. Do you guys think, given this performance by Charbonnet, that he has now earned a bigger role, that even if KW3 comes back next week, now that suddenly it's a split?
I think that it's not so much about Charbonnet's performance, it's about that Ken Walker just cannot stay healthy, absorbing his workload. And so that, in conjunction with the performance, I would suspect that this is going to be a true alternating kind of series by series, to be more like Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren than the previous kind of workhorse type of division in this backfield.
This guy was a second-round pick when they already had Kenneth Walker. That's how highly they've thought of him as an organization.
Sure. But it's a new regime.
Yes, but there's still a lot of the same people in that front office down, that the draft, they were part of the draft process.
And it's also 2 regimes who have seen Kenneth Walker in the training room every single week.
Charbonnet's just very good. Yeah. He's powerful. He's a natural pass catcher. I mean, I think they should be. It's kind of perplexing that they didn't split the time this season, which would have bothered us in fantasy, but in real football, that would have been better beneficial for them. So, I think going forward, when things matter the most, they should split the workload.
It'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. They play the Packers next week at home, and then they're home to Minnesota, at Chicago, at the Rams. Tough schedule upcoming for the Seattle Seahawks as well. So something to sort of keep an eye on that, I have Ken Walker in our league, so I'm nervous about this. Backup producer Pete wanted to trade me Zach Charbonnet, and I wouldn't let him. He wanted Bucky Irving. I know, believe me. He wanted Bucky Irving, and I'm like, I'm not trading Bucky Irving for a backup running back, and now I'm regretting that move. Maybe not. I think Bucky will be fine. He's been very good for me. Bucky has.
My friend Bucky.
My friend Bucky. Anyway, but I do think, given the potential increased workload by Charbonnet and a tough schedule for Seattle coming up, that's a little bit nervous. Honestly, we'll talk more about the running back as we get into it, but the other thing I just wanted to bring up real quickly is just sort of the wide receivers.
JSN, the number 1 wide receiver on Seattle now?
I think there's no question. Since DK Metcalf returned from injury in Week 11, JSN has outscored him every single game. All 4 games, he's been the better wide receiver. Another tough day fantasy-wise for DK Metcalf. JSN gets into the end zone. He looks like the better wide receiver. He's getting more targets as well. Tyler Lockett, feel free to drop him if you haven't already. But, yes, I would argue that Jackson Smith-Njigba is the number 1 wide receiver in Seattle, and I think, like when you see my ranks this week, that'll be reflected. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.